Hi, and welcome everyone to the Elsevier Engineering Series. My name is Mark Petrachko, and I want to welcome you. We hope that you, your family, and all those that support you are well and healthy during these challenging times. Today, we've got a full agenda that'll be presented by two of my colleagues, Michael Schwartz and Chris Cogswell. And just a little bit of logistics. If you have any questions you would like to ask, please put them in the Q&A column, and time permitting, we'll get to them at the end of the session. I'm going to launch a brief poll before I turn things over to Chris and Michael. So if you'd be so kind as to answer just the two brief questions that we have there, it'll give us an understanding of your familiarity with sustainable infrastructure and how it's being applied either at your institution or your company. Just a couple more seconds and we'll get started. Okay, thank you everyone. I'm going to end that poll and I'd like to turn it over to Chris and Michael. Please take it away.
All right, thank you so much, Mark, for the kind introduction. Good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Cogswell. I'm joined today by my esteemed colleague, Michael Schwartz. We're going to be talking to you a little bit today about sustainable infrastructure and some of the ways that you can make use of our tools to find information on this really vast and broad subject. First, before we get started here, a little bit about the people who are presenting to you today. So, like I said, my name is Chris Cogswell. I'm originally from the East Coast. My background is in chemical engineering and specifically on the creation of nanomaterials as adsorbents and catalysts for sustainable applications. So things like carbon capture and conversion, green synthetic routes for these sorts of materials and things like that. And I will pass it over to Michael so he can introduce himself.
Thank you, Chris. So yes, my name is Michael Schwartz. I am a senior customer consultant in the corporate space and work with many of companies that we will be presenting information about. I went to the University of Vermont for my undergraduate degree and have an MBA from the NYU Stern School of Business, and currently reside in Princeton, New Jersey. And then on the side, just everybody has a hobby, and I'm a big baseball fanatic. Love to root for my New York Mets. So let's, though, change it back to our conversation for today.
All right. Thank you, Michael. All right. So what does it mean for infrastructure to be sustainable? There are different definitions from different places. However, the gold standard that I'm sure we've all heard of are the UN 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. These focus on 5 key areas by which a project can be measured on its sustainability or its ability to be sustainable. So these metrics include social, environmental, economic aspects of sustainability, but also look at things like the impact that these projects can have on world peace, as well as on partnerships that can be built between communities and peoples where they may not have been before. Digging deeper into these 5 key metrics, we can see the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that are specifically called out here on the right-hand side. Now, infrastructure is called out in Goal 9. However, sustainable infrastructure is really the foundational part of many of these further goals, if you'll pardon the infrastructure pun there. So for example, developing and building facilities for the cleaning and distribution of clean water, building transport systems that don't require significant upkeep, building transport systems and places and ways for communities to come together to help create economic and educational opportunities for underserved communities and peoples. All of that comes down to the infrastructure that we develop. It's a huge challenge, like we said. It's a field that we honestly could do an entire year's worth of discussions on, but we wanted to look a little bit here just at the basics introductory works and really take a look at what are some of the ways that these groups like the UN have developed these metrics or these goal sets, and also what are some ways that the tools that we have can help you on specific sustainability challenges. So first thing I want to look at actually here is the literature on sustainable infrastructure. And all this information was pulled out of Engineering Village, and the analysis was done using Engineering Village. And so if we look at this here, and so I'm actually going to use here the spotlight for this slide. If we look here at this section, if we look at papers that have been tagged as sustainable infrastructure, these have shown a drastic rise in publications since the year 2000. And, that makes sense, right? We haven't really considered, or we weren't really talking about the buzzword sustainability as much until around the year 2000 and the development of some of these goal sets from places like the UN and other governments. If we look at the controlled vocabularies that are coming up in those papers and the classification codes, we can see things like sustainable infrastructure projects and investments specifically being mentioned quite a bit. Things like life cycle assessments, decision-making methodologies for project management, and then specific projects, things like climate change, urban planning and development. Concrete is a big case here that really gets a lot of look at, right? So building concretes and making sustainable concretes and concretes that can survive in different weather conditions consistently and over time. The applications for these are quite broad, require a very diverse set of skills. But traditionally, if we look at this literature, we can see the focus has been on project management, industrial economics, the costing, and the development of these sustainable infrastructure projects. And so one of the most interesting things for me about this, really, I think a lot of us as engineers are very comfortable with things like, planning out, doing decision-making analysis, building for specific applications. But one of the biggest customer or classification codes here is social sciences, right? The human side of things, the sociology side, are things that maybe us as engineers aren't really used to working on or thinking about so much. And this is where broad data sets can be very useful, and really reference works can be particularly useful here. Now, making sense of everything that's encompassed in sustainable infrastructure and building towards a goal set that our companies or our industries can use, that's really a challenge, right? There's so much there. But there's an interesting white paper that came out not too long ago. It's published by the World Economic Forum Global Future Council on Infrastructure, or GFC. They looked at previous efforts, right? So they basically did a literature review here. And so they looked at efforts by governments, the UN, other kind of large corporations and other large global groups. And so they looked at specifically looking at ways that these efforts could be used to be codified and kind of put down into a list of works or list of ideas that could help spur further capital investment towards these efforts. So verbiage basically and wording that would help industries and governments kind of come together a little bit further on these. And so they looked at two previous major works of interest. The first one was the United Nations Guiding Principles on People First Public-Private Partnerships, which is a tremendous mouthful. Instead, they call it the UN 5 People First Outcomes. These are guidance that the UN put out for all public-private partnerships and development projects, but really implicitly has to do with sustainable infrastructure, right? So if we look here, these really focus on the human cost and opportunities of these things, right? So things like improving access to essential services to lessen social inequality, enhancing resilience of your projects to help with further environmental sustainability and make circular projects, right? So building circular economies around the things that you're working on. Of course, improving economic effectiveness for the work that you're doing. One though that's really interesting, so I guess I should say two that are particularly interesting for me here. And again, things that as engineers we may not usually consider. Replicability and engagement. So what replicability means here, it means that, if you do a great project that's very sustainable, or you develop something that is a wonderful piece of infrastructure that'll help a community greatly, a lot of these governmental groups or these intergovernmental groups are saying, well, that should be made to be that should be shared in such a way that it can be replicated by others. Right, so to really try to scale your impact away from just your community or your area to really making this something that helps transform the world around us. Something that we're maybe not super comfortable with as industry or in industry, but it's something really interesting, right? The other one here is engagement, right? So really engaging all stakeholders in the project. So not just thinking about, well, what do we think internally as a company, but what does the local community think? What do local governments think? How can we help make this more equitable for those groups? Another key guideline that they looked at was the IDB 4 Dimensions of Sustainable Infrastructure. It was created by the Inter-American Development Bank. And so what this looked at, again, these are kind of more specific to project management goals. But it talked about things like, human and labor rights, cultural preservation. And specifically in this case, what they called out that others haven't are things like institutional sustainability, right? So making sure that the work that you're doing as a company aligns with global and national strategies, and that you have a place internally or a group internally whose role it is to help with governance of those changes and making sure that you have accountability internally, right? So doing things like, standards organizations or things like that. Again, something that I think a lot of us as engineers do already, right? We're used to having these sorts of organizations working alongside with us, but trying to build those sustainable goals into there to make sure that we hit everything we need to. Now, finally, what they did here was they put all of these together and created what they called the GFC 6 Sustainable Infrastructure Qualities, right? So again, GFC Global Future Council on Infrastructure. And so what these show, I think, can be a little bit more usable, right? Because they actually give some specific ideas here for things you can do. And so what's nice here is talking about, again, putting all of this together, right? So the people side, the engineering side, the economic side, all of those 5 key areas that we're thinking about, right? So when we think about sustainable infrastructure, it's not just about, making a concrete that is, CO2 or uses less or outputs less CO2 during the creation of clinker or something. It's not just about, building roads that connect communities. It's about things like, making sure that the benefits of those things are shared. Making sure that, of course, you are building circular projects as opposed to projects where there's a lot of waste and other things. Building for resilience in the face of climate catastrophe and other weather events. Things that maybe we wouldn't necessarily think of initially as being part of sustainable infrastructure, but which we can sometimes take credit for. So quite interesting. And like I said, this is a great white paper. I really think it's a valuable one. So if you're thinking about what sustainable infrastructure means for your company or your group, and you want to learn more, this is a really good one to take a look at. But now that we've kind of gone over here a general background on what sustainable infrastructure means, what some of these groups that are doing this work talk about with this, we really wanted to focus and shift it over to how some of our tools can help you do this sort of literature analysis and also find info to help support your own sustainable development goals. And so I'm going to pass this along to my colleague, Michael Schwartz, who Michael trained me when I joined Elsevier. He knows more about the tools than anyone I've ever met. So he is a great person here to talk about this today. Michael, I pass it over to you now.
Okay. So thanks, Chris. Yes, so I'm going to show how you can use our tools relative to a case study from a very large engineering design company. These companies do so much work involving sustainability. They do a lot of work that will be in tandem with government on projects such as this one, as Chris alluded to in his review. And the challenge here was to demolish old buildings, abate an issue that these old buildings had asbestos, and then perform groundwater remediation in the area. In the end, they were successful at doing this and had to remove close to 60,000 tons of contaminated soil across an 8.6 acre site, and then revitalize this site as part of an urban renewal project in creating a park. So a very clear sustainable infrastructure case. And now I will share my screen and show you how you can use our tools to do this. So we'll start with Engineering Village. So in Chris's presentation, he did a simple search from the Compendex database on sustainable infrastructure. And after he got his results of 39,000 or so, he went directly to the controlled vocabulary, which was able to break up his search, where you can see the results from climate change, from cost, the pure sustainable development, and so forth. So if you were someone studying, perhaps you're an environmental engineer at school and involved in such a project, the project that we're talking about today involved engineers, architects, even geologists. So very interdisciplinary in the way it was done. You can start to look at specific areas such as this. and begin to look at the research in the area. Or you can simply go in here from these results and map it out in a graphical fashion. Go to maximizing it and just see the trends year to year and just see all the other factors that maybe Chris wasn't able to show in that one slide to really see what you're doing. So it's a good way to get started with the literature. But in this project, let's go now turn over to Novel and take a look at some of the searches you might want to do. And a lot of times with Novel, you might have to search on a few different things and put them together. And we'll show you how you can do that. So we'll start with a basic search on groundwater remediation. You can get directly into particular resources and go directly to that if you want, but we'll just finish the search. And we'll center in on the chapters. But if you were doing a project and you wanted to save this content, you always have the ability to save this, open up project folders if you wanted to, create new folders for the project and really organize the work that you're doing if that was what you wanted to do. But we'll look at just the chapters in this case to really hone in on groundwater remediation. And Novel provides you a concept tool that really narrows down the search and gives you an idea of some areas that you might want to look at. So, in this case, we do have choices related to soil remediation and contamination of soil and contaminated groundwater. We even have geological aspects. So you can pick and choose what would be important to the project. And it narrowed down those results. And you can see right here, content related to contaminated groundwater remediation, that when you open it would simply highlight all the terms that you used in that search. And then you can again put that in those folders if you create one for the project. And obviously something that could have been very easily used in that project. Another part of the project was looking at asbestos, mitigating asbestos, particularly a problem with older buildings. So you can do a general asbestos search, come up with the books, the chapters, narrowed down again by the concepts if you so choose in here. If this was not of use to you, there are other ways, but you can simply go in here, carcinogenicity and things of that water, find things related to water and so forth. But you might want to do it in a different fashion where you want to look at materials and properties specifically related to asbestos. So if I can go directly in this fashion to over 450 tables and graphs, or I can look for a specific property. Maybe we have to deal with density. And you just drag it in, just maybe it's particular aspects of the density. Or if there was specific numeric values, you can set those parameters if you so choose. And this will take me directly to that particular set of results on density of the asbestos, where you can now open it up. And as you can see here, get various values of density and in particular, the type of asbestos that it might be. An alternate way of looking at this, if we go back to just the asbestos results, is to even choose on graphical representations, where you can now digitize and place points in here, comparisons related to graphite and asbestos yarn and things like that. Maybe this one that could be of interest to you with the air. And you can open up graph digitizers, where you can plot points, average mixture, moisture content, and work your problem from there based on the parameters of what you're working with. So you can kind of put these tools together. And maybe if you're looking at the buildings involved, another search that could be of interest and the buildings and their foundation as they were removing them and destroying them. You can even do it in this fashion with sustainable, oops, sorry. I'm sorry, wrong term. Subsurface contamination and building. And as you can see here, various results: building mitigation, gray water design estimates, general design conditions for buildings and sites, where you can again go into the novel content and find the information that is important to the work you're doing. There are a couple of other ways that you can also work with novels content if you're just searching the field, where you can browse against particular subject areas that we have connected to sustainability and simply find sustainable energy and development. And there are various subtopics where you can look at sustainable urban development and find in particular the content that might work for you. As you can see here, you can even auto-complete and just find the infrastructure titles and data as infrastructure for smart cities. Break up the books, find the book, save the book if you want, even put it on a mobile device if you've added that. Put it into the folders as we showed you earlier in this demonstration. We have another area that could be of importance to you, and of course that would be the environmental engineering area. A similar thing, a lot of content on remediation and waste treatment, where you can again find the books, find all the water titles, and really begin to work on your project. But Novel offers you one other way to find the content, and that is by key societies and publishers that are aggregating their content with Novel. And one of these that could have been used in this project and has a lot of content on groundwater is the AWWA, American Water Works Association. And you can quickly bring up specific titles just from the American Water Works Association. And you can just go to their titles. Or if you wanted to, you can even add in particular, if we wanted to look at their water titles, break it down even further, and it will give you both the books. And if we were to scroll through particular sections within those books, and you can get into groundwater management and just hone in on a particular publisher, break it down, save the books, and go from there. So I hope that helps you look at the various strategies that you can utilize when working on remediation. And I will turn this back over to Mark.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Chris, and thank you to those who are participating in today's session. I'm going to launch a second poll, and then I'm going to look into the Q&A. If you do have any questions, we've got a couple there. Please do put the questions into the Q&A. So Chris and Michael, the first question: how else are you showcasing your commitment to sustainable information and practices?
Okay, so I think it has to go back to me here. So I have to once again, am I still in the share?
Yep, no, go ahead, Michael, you can share now.
Okay. So not only on Novel can you search in those subject areas, but Novel is committed to net zero. We add these word clouds where if you click into them, it will give you an idea here of just broad-based searching that you can do to get you started. So if we were, we can just go to one of these at this point, but we have other ones related to circular economy and other ideas in energy transition, where if it had anything to do, let's say, with energy policy, for instance, since that's a bit of the theme that we have today, you can see very broad-based results that can get you started in searching against some of these sustainability concepts.
Thank you, Michael. Another question: if I'm trying to incorporate this into my classroom, are there some tips that you can provide on how I can do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I can take that one, Michael.
Sure.
Just like Michael showed on those Novel info pages, but even when he was going through here on the Novel content, one thing you can do here is up top there, you'll see share search query or even save search query. If you click on those buttons there, The nice thing there is that link, the shortened link is static. So if you share that query there, you can copy that onto a website at your school. So for example, if you have like a website for your class or a learning management system or those sorts of things, you can kind of provide that there. Another really cool feature on Novel are the ability to create folders. So we didn't get to show it too much today, but if you go over there to on My Novel and then go there, all of the content that you save, you can put into folders. And then you'll notice there on Michael's thing there, it says shared folders piping project. You'll notice that there's some users there on the right-hand side. Those are actually people who have actually gotten access to the folder and now can get that data that's been saved there. So another thing you can do for your university classroom or industrial team or whoever really, you can create these folders that are useful for the kind of work that you're doing, share the folder, and then make it available to them. So another really cool way that you can kind of share this content. And you can do similar things on Engineering Village as well. But yeah, it's just a great way to kind of keep those things going and make sure that your students have access to that foundational knowledge that, again, on concepts like this that are sort of newer or very broad like this, giving students access to really kind of this sort of information set here can be very useful for them, and giving them more stuff to read into and learn about than just the stuff they cover in the classroom, which of course your time is limited, right? So getting stuff that they can do outside of class is really a useful way to do that.
Thank you, Chris and Michael. That's great partnership in answering those questions together. And from what I see, the last question that's been submitted, where does the data in Novel and Engineering Village come from? Is it just Elsevier content? This is a question we get a lot. So Michael, would you answer that one, please?
Sure. So in both cases, whether it be Engineering Village or Novel, this is an aggregation of content. So it is not just it's not just Elsevier content. So if you were to access a database or getting that asbestos information, a lot of it is from many of our publishing partners. We have so many of them. So it is also data. We even have databases from government entities like NIST. So we are aggregating data, and it's not just specific to Elsevier. Engineering Village also, in your results, it's aggregating content from conference proceedings and also from various journals, even from doctorate dissertations. So it is a conglomeration of various information that yields those results.
Thank you, Michael. And thank you to everyone who has been here today for attending and for your attention. I'm sorry, I see we've got one other question that's come in here. Is the content free? That's a question I usually see as well. So is the content that's available free content? Michael, you want to take that one, or Chris?
Chris, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. So it's a really good question. So if you want access to the tools, you can contact us at Elsevier. It's not free content, right? We license it from our partners in these areas. So yeah, it's a really good question. On Engineering Village, we do have open access articles, which are available for you to access for free. But the content on Novel, it comes from publishing partners of ours, so we license it through them. And so yeah, it's not free. But yeah, please reach out. We're more than happy. And honestly, many of you on this call today are watching this video. Your company, your university, your place of work might already subscribe to these things. You may just not know it. So reach out to your librarians and your information services teams, or even feel free again to reach out to us on the engineering customer consultant team. And we're more than happy to find that out for you and help you find that information. So yeah, it's a great question.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Michael. We've got another webinar coming up in 2 weeks. That will be June 2nd. It will be on energy transition. It'll actually be the second one in a series that will be coming up. And this is going to be based on reports that have been done globally. We'll have some internal experts at Elsevier outside of our team who'll be giving us the highlights of those global reports, what individual countries and companies are doing as far as getting to net zero. If you would like to view any of our past sessions, The recordings can be viewed here in the center. You see the link to the YouTube channel, as well as our LinkedIn and our Bright Talk URLs. So we thank you for your attention, and we welcome you to view past sessions to gain insights that you may have missed in previous sessions. So thank you so much for joining us today. We wish you a great week, and thank you so much for attending. Have a great day, everyone.